I told my kids, and at this point they're probably, maybe 5 and 3. I told my kids this insane story about money babies and how, you put your money in a bank or an investment and then it has babies. So you have a quarter and the quarter gives birth to a penny and a dime, and then the penny and the dime give birth to other babies. And I
Right.
told this insane story, but they got it. They understood it. And we still talk about money babies today. I included it in my book as a way to explain sort of interest in dividends and how you grow your wealth. And I still talk about it with clients today. And so it's making it, putting it at their level, right? And also making it and sort of normalizing it, right? So you don't want to dump any of your financial stressors on your children.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Aspire and Acquire podcast. I'm your host, Sandeep Suri. Join me for listening to some incredible stories about some of the best professionals from very diverse fields like combat flying, robotic surgery, dancing, tea farming, journalism, deep sea diving, and so on. These accomplished professionals are not just outstanding in their jobs, but also have unique stories to share with us. We have tried to make the show truly global by having these guests from different parts of the world. The financial industry is undergoing a transformative shift, driven by advancements in technology, evolving consumer needs, and the rise of decentralized finance. Cryptocurrency, once a niche curiosity, has emerged as a powerful financial instrument, reshaping the way we think about money, investments, and financial inclusion. Offering transparency, lower costs, and greater accessibility, crypto is redefining how we think about money and investments. Yet, with its promise comes complexity, making expert guidance and risk management more critical than ever. As cryptocurrency has become a more integral part of the global financial system, the need for robust risk management, accessible financial education, and thoughtful guidance has never been more critical. Bridging the gap between innovation and accessibility requires visionaries who can navigate this dynamic landscape while empowering individuals to build a secure financial future. Today's guest, Kevin Feige, is at the forefront of this evolution. As head of enterprise risk at Kraken, a leading and secure cryptocurrency platform, Kevin is driving global crypto adoption while managing its unique risks. He is also the founder of Walk You to Wealth, a platform making financial planning accessible to all, and the author of Walk You to Wealth, which offers practical steps to financial freedom. With over 20 years in finance and a passion for empowering others, Kevin bridges the gap between traditional finance and the future of money. Let's dive into the show. Hi, Kevin. Let me
Hi,
start by
Sandeep. How you doing?
good. Let me start by welcoming you to the Aspire and Acquire podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to host someone with such a diverse and impactful career in finance and cryptocurrency. We're excited to dive into your journey and insights today. So, shall we begin the show?
Sounds great, Sandeep.
Excellent. So, your journey in finance spans over 2 decades or so with roles at companies like Fidelity and Coinbase. What inspired you to venture into the world of cryptocurrency and personal finance coaching?
You're making me feel old with the 2 decades. Um, so, for me, I grew up, I sort of middle class background in New York. My father was a sanitation worker, as my father would say, a garbage man. My mom stayed at home and raised us for most of my life, and then worked as an administrative assistant in a hospital. And so, very middle class, blue collar background. And when I started my career, I started in public accounting, Big Four at KPMG, and I eventually got a job at Fidelity Investments. And when I was interviewing at Fidelity, I
Mhm.
remember I was interviewing for an audit position, and I said during my interview I knew nothing about personal finance and nothing about financial services. To which my interviewer said, "You probably shouldn't say that here." During an interview at Fidelity, which they were right. But despite my brutally honest answers, they hired me anyway. And so it was my first foray into financial services, which and when I was at KPMG, my clients were, Pepsi was one of my big clients, right? So it's a consumer product. You can touch it, feel it, taste it. I drank too much Pepsi when I was there. But financial services is very different. If you're outside the world it feels like a black hole. It feels like a bit of magic, if you will, right? Because it's just less tangible. And so for me, Fidelity was my first foray, and it was a awesome learning experience. And I spent the bulk of my career there. And then when Fidelity started, I'll say dabbling or figuring out what their crypto product was going to look like, I was involved from a risk perspective. And so when they were sort of, I'd say it was more in the idea phase of what could this be and what would this look like. And then while I was at Fidelity, Coinbase reached out and asked me if I'd be interested in coming over and joining Coinbase and heading up their risk function there. And then, from there, started my own company of financial coaching. And for me, it all goes back to the same thing. So while what I do at today at Kraken from a risk perspective and what I do with my financial coaching business with Walk You to Wealth are seem apples to oranges, but to me, it's all about financial freedom, right? So
Hmm.
crypto sort of unlocks financial freedom for folks in one way. And so I view that as sort of core to everything that Kraken is doing, and everything that I try to do from my risk role there. And then from a personal financial coaching perspective, it's the same idea. How do you help people? How do you help
Mhm.
people figure it out? How do you help people navigate this world, both TradFi and crypto? And how do you help folks get to financial freedom, which feels, I think, unattainable for most folks.
Interesting. Yeah. And it resonates very well with me. We both worked at Fidelity. Your journey is very interesting. Yeah. Okay. How do you balance your roles in the cutting edge world of crypto and the traditional world of financial planning?
It's a great question. I don't view it as a balance. I view it as it's just, I don't know, it's sort of life at this point. Everything sort of intersects, right? So, whether it's my personal financial coaching, which does blend over, right? So I've obviously, with everything happening in the crypto space, I have more and more financial coaching clients who are asking about crypto and want to learn and be educated. And so that's terrific to see. And so, I think as much as there's been in the past, I don't know, I'd say a decade or so, right? There's a crypto world and there's a TradFi world or a traditional financial world. I think those worlds are melding together. I mean, you see more and more, TradFi institutions starting to get pretty heavily involved in crypto, and I think especially as regulations change, or at least there's clarity on regulation, I think you're going to see more of that. So I think it's ultimately going to be one world, right? It's going to be a world of sort of financial services and helping folks build real wealth, whether they choose to build real wealth in traditional financial products, or I'll say, direct crypto or crypto wrapped in traditional financial products, right? Like with the new Bitcoin ETF and Ether ETFs, and I think we'll have more crypto ETFs in the future. That I think the worlds they're so commingled already, and I think that trend is just going to continue.
So there is an intersection between the two you're saying, and which is a logical point, right? So there is a traditional world of financial planning, and then of course, you have the new technology which is coming in the form of cryptos and other financial products. So there is definitely in a very holistic way, if you see, it is still part of the same universe, which is the
Yeah,
financial world,
absolutely.
right?
And
Yeah.
especially Cindy, from I'll go to my financial coaching side, especially from a client perspective, right? Like folks, what I've found is when I'm working with clients, one, they want to learn, they want to understand, whether they're invested in, a traditional target date fund in their 401k, right? Or whatever. There, a lot of folks, what I find is, that's their first foray into investing, right? Is their 401k, and it's usually they're in the default option, whatever their default option
Right.
is, and they don't necessarily even, I think, Cindy, to where you were going, they don't even always understand what they're invested in. They don't understand how much they're actually paying, right? So some of that is difficult as well. As you know, you're not getting a bill from your mutual fund at the end of
Right.
the month like you are from Netflix, right? So I think for folks, it's understanding, all of that, and then crypto's just another piece of that, and trying to understand, the difference between different cryptos, or where and how crypto could fit into your portfolio, and also, crypto gets a little bit more nuanced and I don't know, say complicated for some folks in terms of how they want to invest in it, but that's changing too, right? Like, I mean,
Right.
a year ago we didn't have ETFs, right? Now we have ETFs,
Yeah.
which makes it a lot easier for folks to get exposure to crypto without needing to understand the ins and outs.
Correct. Yeah. So, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for innovation in the financial services industry today? We all know that the financial service industry is going through a huge change in terms of technology interventions, in terms of change management, and so on. So, what are some of those biggest opportunities in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think about a lot of things that Kraken has done that in my current role and what we're sort of striving towards. And for me, it's all about sort of not crypto. I'm using crypto broadly, right, to also mean the sort of blockchain or the technology that's underlying crypto. And how do we store, transfer, and manage value, right? And how do we do that quicker, faster, cheaper? And I'll give you a good example. I'll say there's definitely a first world problem here in this example, but I was buying a
Mhm.
car recently, and I needed to put a down payment down on my car, and they asked me for a certified check. Now I don't even have a traditional bank account, and so I said, well, I don't have a traditional bank account. I don't want to set one up just to give you a certified check. Long story short, they said, well, you could send us a wire transfer. So I went home and I sent a wire transfer. This was a Wednesday, I believe. And I was supposed to pick up my car on Saturday. And they called me Saturday and they said, the car's not ready. And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, we just don't have your money yet.
Mhm.
And I said, you don't have my money yet. I sent it on Wednesday.
Right.
But that's the traditional financial world, right? Like the settlement times and take so long, and the level of expense is significant. And multiple sort of huge conglomerates and companies that are also sitting at the center of that. So how do you do things quicker, faster, cheaper? And I think about crypto and Kraken are certainly at the center of all that. How do you send payments cross border? And how do you do that without Western Union fees and everything
Right.
else that folks deal with? And we live in a world, especially in the United States. I'm in Massachusetts. We live in a world where it's like a Starbucks. There's a bank on every corner. You think about the rest of the world, right? And that's where the big opportunity is, not only in the U.S. but outside. Especially in undeveloped countries and emerging markets where you know they're just in a completely different situation, right? So like my example was a first world problem, right, with my car.
Yeah.
Right, it's not a big deal, right? Had I used crypto, I could have driven the car home that day, but it really didn't make much of a difference. But you think about outside of developed countries, and there's we have lack of financial inclusion. You have millions of folks who are unbanked. You have, millions of folks who don't even have physical access. It's not like,
Yeah.
again, with us, where we have an ATM on every corner. So how do you include more folks, right? How do you let someone send money, back to their home country without spending, 20 or 25% in fees? And how do you do it instantly and safely? And that's where crypto, crack and blockchain, are going to play huge roles. So for me, it's storing value, transferring value, managing value, but doing it quicker, faster, cheaper.
Yeah. What's your view about crypto becoming a legal tender at some point in time in some of these Western world to begin with, and then probably it'll percolate down to rest of the world? Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think you're seeing, at least here in the U.S., after this presidential election, you're seeing more, in Argentina and other countries as well. You're seeing more countries talk about adopting it as sort of a strategic reserve. You're seeing more companies, right? So Tesla, MicroStrategy, other companies that are also adopting it. So I think you'll at least Bitcoin, and I think you're going to see that probably expand into other cryptocurrencies as well. But I think you'll definitely see it as a store of value, as a reserve, if you will. I don't know if you'll see it as a full currency. I think you will once the payments piece catches up. Right.
Right.
Right now it's hard in the sense of you go everywhere you go, right? So you don't know, you go grocery shopping, all right, and there are card readers everywhere, and so everyone's tapping their phones and everyone's swiping their credit cards. That what we need to do and that's what I think the next wave that's coming is the payments piece is
Mhm.
how do you get crypto embedded with the payments piece? So I think stable coins are a huge driver of that. And then I think you just have to get it embedded with the same technology so that when folks go to, wherever they're doing their grocery shopping and they tap their phone, well, instead of, putting it on their Visa card or American Express, right? Maybe they just want to use their USDC or their stable coin
Yeah.
that they have.
And that'll be interesting story to watch, how it unveils as you move forward. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the biggest misconceptions, purely from a risk standpoint in this crypto world. Can you throw some light on that?
Yeah, so I think you still have I think you have a couple. I think there's it's not safe. I think you
Mhm.
get that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you still have not as much. So when I think about when I was first involved at Fidelity, when Fidelity was sort of thinking about what their product would look like and be, and this was also Silk Road, which was a huge sort of I'll say crypto site selling a lot of illegal goods, right? So there was this link between crypto and it's only used by criminals. And I think we've gotten away from that for thank goodness. Because it's just a headline, right? It's a clickbait headline and it's not actually true. But I think you still have a little bit of that. But I'd say the biggest misconception is that crypto scams are super sort of elaborate and they're different than I'll say traditional finance or TradFi scams or fraud. But in reality, a lot of the quote unquote crypto scams and a lot of them grab bigger headlines, right? So that's a bit of the problem is we live in a world of headlines and clickbait. But a lot of those quote unquote crypto scams are really just classic romance scams and investment scams that have been going on, I don't know, since the dawn of time. And
Yeah.
so, although they're swiping crypto or targeting crypto, and in some cases, because if they get access, right, those transactions are largely irreversible, right? So if you do get access to, say, it's a romance scam, and you get access to someone's account, and you move their Bitcoin from their account to your account, right? It's different than TradFi, where if it went from Fidelity to Bank of America, Fidelity could usually claw that money back because of that settlement time, right? I go back to
Right.
my car story, right? It takes so long for transactions to settle. With crypto, you can't claw it back, but that's a feature, right? It's not that's why we have quick settlement times. And so I think there's though this misconception that crypto scams are different or more complicated, and they're largely the same scams we've been seeing for years. They're just being performed on crypto platforms or directly where folks are holding their own crypto.
Yeah. Let me just double down on risk component of crypto one more time. What unique challenges do you face managing enterprise risk in a rapidly evolving industry like crypto compared to traditional financial services?
Yeah, it's faster. Everything's faster. I'd say I'm fortunate in the sense that I joined Kraken in July. I This is the most security focused company I've ever been a part of. And so that makes my job much easier. Not easy, but much easier, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely a security first approach here. So as we want to move quick, we want to move fast, and that's the nature of crypto. But everything is about how do you blend? And this is the hardest part for almost every company, and I think Kraken particularly does a really good job. But how do you blend, first-rate security that folks expect, but with a great user experience? And that's hard. It's really hard. It was hard at Fidelity. It's hard at Coinbase. It's hard here too at
Yeah.
Kraken. It's really hard to get both of those right because a lot of times being more secure means more checks, if you will, right? More blockers. And so then that's not a great user experience. It's not a great customer experience. And so here Kraken does a great job of balancing it and also taking just a security first approach. So a good example on the Kraken side is, from a pure security perspective, is you have multiple different sort of pass keys, if you will, right, that you can add on your Kraken account. So most companies, most financial service companies, especially TradFi, they'll lock you into like a two-factor authentication that's usually like a text message or something like
Right.
that.
Right.
Which one, text message two-factor authentication, certainly better than no two-factor authentication, but not great. Kraken one doesn't allow that, so they just take that off the table. But then two, you can add your own passkeys. So it could be like a YubiKey, or it could be your fingerprint ID that you're using to log into your iPhone or your Android device, right? So you can choose, and you can have multiple. So you have the flexibility. Like we're not going to lock you into one, right? You could choose sort of what works for you, but we're also going to push you towards the safer options, and also just not allow some of the unsafe options like text messaging. And
So
so
Kraken
having that balance is huge. Oh, sorry, Sandeep.
sorry, no, I was just saying Kraken does give you a lot of flexibility to kind of choose from in terms of authentication and making it more secure.
Yeah, and that's like taking the I'll say the least secure options off the table, but then giving folks a plethora of more secure options, right? It is how you balance the user experience and the security piece. And again, it's definitely in every product and service that we're building here. Security is front and center. And so, and I've, sometimes, as I'm sure you've seen in your career, Sandeep, sometimes it's an afterthought. Sometimes it's the last thought. In this case, it's generally the first thought. It's we want to roll out this great product. Here's what we want it to do. We want cross-border payments to be through text message, right? As an example. So we want a product like that. Okay, let's get security at the table on day one, and risk and compliance, and make sure it's the best, most secure product for our customers.
Right. So let's talk about the new age investors. What advice would you offer to someone new to cryptocurrency who wants to incorporate it into their financial plan?
Yeah, I'd say learn, right? So there's a ton of resources out there. Whether it's podcasts, books. I'd certainly point folks to Kraken's site. So on Kraken's site, there's a learned section, which has been curated from sort of experts throughout Kraken about different cryptocurrencies, security, risk, storage options, almost everything you'd want to know about, and everything you want to learn about crypto is on that site for free, right? So there are great resources that are free. Also podcasts, books, like learn as much as you can. But then I think some folks do learn. And then it's an overwhelming world, right? I think TradFi is overwhelming as well, but certainly crypto is overwhelming and it's newer. But then you need to start. And when I talk to folks, especially financial coaching clients, it's about starting with money that you can afford to lose and sort of experimenting, right? And figuring it out and figuring out, buy crypto on a centralized exchange for, buy $10 of Bitcoin on a centralized exchange like Kraken, right? And then, take that $10 and move it to a self-custody wallet and figure out what that's like, right? And, do these little sort of experiments, but do it with, 10, 12, $15 that you can afford to lose, and you'll learn so much by sort of experimenting, but you also don't have to worry about risking a significant balance of your portfolio. And then once you learn, then figure out what's the right portfolio for you, right? What's the right allocation? Is it in terms of crypto, is it 1%? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? I mean, I think we're just getting to the world where I think financial planners are starting to catch up and making this part of portfolios. And then there's a lot out there, right? It's like the stock market, right? So there are thousands and thousands of cryptocurrencies. There are thousands and thousands of stocks. Not all of them are great investments. So how do you find the ones that make sense for you and your portfolio? That's certainly a harder second step, but I would say you learn and then you start and you experiment.
Yeah. By the way, I was looking at your Kraken site this morning, and it's pretty impressive. It has a lot of information, how the market is doing, which crypto is doing, at what rate, tracking everything. It's pretty inclusive that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that learn section in particular is a great
Yeah.
resource for folks to sort of dive into. And I think that we take a lot of pride in that section because we want folks to learn this is a hard world, right? And we want folks to understand what they're doing and how they're doing it. And we want folks to also understand how we're doing it, right? How are we
Yeah.
keeping your account secure? So
Absolutely.
it's definitely a good starting point.
Yeah. I want to switch gears now and talk about Walk You to Wealth. You run a financial services company which is more into planning, and it's called Walk You to Wealth. What motivated you to start, and how does it differ from traditional financial planning services?
Yeah. So what motivated me to start is how do you help more people? To be honest, so as I mentioned, I think Cindy, when we started, right, when I started Fidelity, I mean, I knew nothing about financial services, and then, I was fortunate to spend, a good amount of my career in financial services and also pick up various certifications. So I am a certified financial planner. And it's funny, when I started Walk You to Wealth, I started meeting with other financial planners, and some of them said to me, "Why are you doing this?"
Mhm.
Meaning, not why are you entering financial planning, but why are you entering financial planning with such low fees and it's such a different model, and not managing assets. And I'm doing it because I want to help people. And so what sort of differentiates Walk You to Wealth from traditional financial planning is, it's somewhat similar to crypto in the sense that, TradFi or traditional financial could be exclusionary, right? So you have folks in that maybe can't get loans because of their income levels or because of their background or because of their race or gender, all these things. TradFi is from a financial advisory and planning perspective can also be sort of exclusionary from the standpoint of usually folks are managing assets, right? Not always, but they're usually managing assets. Usually it's about 1% fee. And then because they're managing your assets, you're required to have 250,000 or 500,000 or $1 million, right? Just to get in the door and
Yeah.
meet with someone. And by default, you're excluding so many folks who are just they're in debt or they're trying to, climb out or they're just starting to build wealth. They're just starting their careers and they want to get an early jump and figure this world out as early as possible. And so for me, it was like, how do you help all of those people?
Mhm.
And build something that's sort of easy and reasonable from a fee perspective. And so the way Walk Your Wealth works is it's flat monthly fees. There's no managing of assets, so it doesn't matter your income, doesn't matter your assets. And for me, it was about just trying to help as many people as possible. And so I have, someone I usually get the question when I'm meeting with new clients, do you have another client like me? And I always say, I don't, because all my clients are unique. They're all different. I have clients as my oldest client is 70 years old and she just made her first ever investment. And like that's awesome. Like that's a super exciting moment to be a part of for me. And then I have clients who are just graduating college and just starting their careers, and they're gonna have such a leg up on even me. I probably became educated from a financial perspective in my late 20s, early 30s,
Mhm.
where I really started figuring out this world of personal finance. And so to get someone at 21, 22, that's a huge win. And also folks who are struggling in credit card debt. And I have a client who's a month away from a year-long plan to get out of credit card debt. And like that's a huge moment. So for me, it was all about just flipping that model. How do you help more people? How do you include more people? How do you make financial education more accessible, more engaging? Was really what drove me.
Very interesting. Yeah, I know the fact that you did mention that, you try and offer customized plans for your customers. How do you tailor your financial coaching to meet the needs of people with such diverse background and different income levels and financial goals
Yeah.
too, right?
So I'd say two things. I try to meet everyone where they are and move at their pace, right? So meeting them where they are, meaning, in some cases, folks are somewhat educated from a financial perspective, right? And they just want to fine tune where they are and learn a little bit more. And in some cases, folks are, rightfully so. Like we never learned any of this in school, right? They're ignorant to this whole world. And they want to learn as much as possible. So we go at their pace. And I meet them where they are. So if they're struggling in debt or they don't understand something, then we spend more time on it. If
Mhm.
I'm not explaining something well enough or they don't get it, then we spend more time on it. And so for me, it's all about making sure they feel comfortable, right? It's for folks that talk about their finances, it's a sensitive topic, it's a vulnerable topic, and you want folks to feel comfortable. I always say, like for me, what I'm driving at the end of the day isn't so much, I certainly want them to be in a better financial situation. I want their net worth to grow. I want all of those sort of concrete deliverables. But more than anything, I want them to be more financially confident. Like I want them to feel good about their next financial decision. I want them ultimately not to need me, right? I
Yeah.
want to, so that's a different model too, right? So we usually, someone's managing your assets, you're sort of locked in for life, or that's the way it feels. With me, I want them to almost graduate, right? I want to teach them everything I know. I want them to feel really good. And then I want them to not need me or tap back in when they get to another, critical juncture. Maybe they're maybe buying a new house or having a child or something like that. And
Right.
so for me, the flat monthly fees help. There are, three different tiered packages. And the packages just work about how frequently are we meeting, right? So if we're meeting monthly, or are we meeting quarterly, those are sort of the higher and the lower ends of the packages.
Yeah.
So it's like how frequent of a touch point do you want and do you need? And so that's the way I tailor it. It makes it pretty easy and clean for folks to understand what are they paying and what are they getting.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, so you're a father of two. How do you approach technical financial literacy to your own children, and what lessons do you hope they carry forward?
So my youngest just turned 11. My oldest just recently turned 13. And so I would say you start young.
Right.
So you can't schools still aren't teaching it in the US, and I'm sure it's similar around the world, or at least not consistently. And so for me,
Absolutely.
start young, and make it as real as possible. So my kids, I want to say they were my my oldest might have been about 5, and we started when we started giving them sort of a small allowance, and we would take $1 of their allowance and we would invest it into an index fund at Fidelity, actually, into their account, and we would go through the clicks. Like, he'd sit on my lap when he was little, and we'd go through the clicks together, and I think he sort of, not that he understood what was happening, right? But he got time with me, and we got to do it together, and then, as we drove around, I would tell him, we own, Starbucks or this or that, right? These publicly traded companies that you'd see when you're driving in the car. And I remember when I knew he started to get it is we were online at Walmart and we were returning a
Mm.
lava lamp that they had bought. And my oldest said to me, "Dad, why do we have to wait online?" And I was like, "Well, there's just more people here." And he goes, "But don't we own this place?" And I said,
That's very interesting.
we said, yeah. So I was like, he gets it, but I was like, we own like a very small fraction of this place. Your $1 every week isn't
Uh,
going to move the needle at Walmart.
uh,
But he started to understand that he owned, and
yeah,
he was probably
right,
maybe 7 at the time, right? So you
right.
start young and you do it at their level. I mean, another thing that when I was trying to get them, to your point, more engaged, and I wrote this in my book, and I do this with clients today, is like I was trying to explain to them interest, right? And how do you earn interest and how do you earn dividends and that, those sort of concepts that are obviously foreign to kids. And I told my kids, and at this point they're probably, maybe 5 and 3. I told my kids this insane story about money babies and how, you put your money in a bank or an investment and then it has babies. So you have a quarter and the quarter gives birth to a penny and a dime, and then the penny and the dime give birth to other babies. And I
Right.
told this insane story, but they got it. They understood it. And we still talk about money babies today. I included it in my book as a way to explain sort of interest in dividends and how you grow your wealth. And I still talk about it with clients today. And so it's putting it at their level, right? And also making it and sort of, normalizing it, right? So you don't want to, dump any of your financial stressors on your children, certainly, but you want, like, my wife and I will openly have conversations about, I don't know, the financial markets or crypto or what's happening in Kraken or products and services and things. And just them hearing it and making it, normalizing it, I think helps. So many folks grow up in a house where, no one talks about money and it's sort of this secret topic or this taboo topic. And I
Right.
think that's dangerous as well. So I think you got to start young, you got to normalize it, and you got to bring it down to their level.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Yeah. So before I let you go, your book, Walk You to Wealth, distills complex financial topics into simple steps. What are the most challenging part of writing it? And what do you hope readers take away from it?
Yeah, it's a great question, Sandeep. The most challenging part of writing was, you know, I wrote probably 10 pages and I was like, I think this is everything I know. And then I was like, maybe it's a blog post, not a book. And then over time, I would just, as I learn more, right, I would just keep adding and adding and how do I explain this concept better, right? How do I simplify this concept? And so for me, what I hope folks take from it is um, a simplistic take on wealth and also an actionable book. Like, there's no shortage of books on personal finance. There
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
thousands. But for me, how do you make it actionable? So after each section, it's like, okay, here's what it is, explained in personalized stories, and things that I've gone through with, my family, my kids, my life. And so I try to personalize them as much as I can. But then at the end, it's like, here are the actual steps you can take to build wealth. And it goes sort of piece by piece. And so it's just hard writing, right? So like I thought
Yeah.
I had 10 pages and I thought that was it. And then I just kept writing and writing and writing. And so my hope is, if it helps some people get there, that's a win. And it was worth
Absolutely.
the time and effort.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, this conversation has been nothing short of enlightening. Thank you for sharing your experiences and perspectives across such diverse topics, from redefining enterprise risk in cryptocurrency to making personal finance approachable to everyone. As we navigate the evolving world of finance, the lessons from managing risk in the crypto world remind us to challenge traditional ways of thinking. This shift encourages us to embrace innovation while staying grounded in financial literacy. Your insights not only inspire, but also equip listeners to rethink their approach to wealth creation and risk management. Thank you once again for joining us on the Aspire and Acquire podcast. It has been a pleasure having you with us, Kevin. Cheers.
Thanks, Sandy. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. In this episode, we are thrilled to spotlight a truly inspiring book written by none other than our guest today, Kevin Feige. Yes, the legendary creative mind has turned his talents toward something different, and the result is Walk You to Wealth. It beautifully unpacks the day to day financial challenges we all face and offers practical, realistic strategies to overcome them. What's more, Walk You to Wealth is an easy read, perfect for anyone, whether you are just starting out on your financial journey or looking to refine your money management skills. It's relatable, actionable, and brimming with insights that can transform the way you think about your finances. Trust us, you don't want to miss this.